Welcome back to StillPoint Logic. Today's episode was a little hard for me to write, even though the subject that I had in mind was very clear when I started writing it. It didn't come out very good, in my opinion. But I hope that the words that I chose will resonate with you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate, just send them over. So today is about when reason knows, but the body doesn't. And let's start with something familiar. You understand something, you can explain it, you believe it, and still your mind reacts as if it isn't true, and your body follows. And for example, you know you are safe, but you don't feel it. You know this relationship pattern is harmful, but you still miss it. You know this fear doesn't make sense, but it shows up anyways. And somewhere inside, another voice begins to whisper, "Why is this still happening? Shouldn't I be past this by now?" If I really understood this, wouldn't I feel different? This is often the moment you turn against yourself. Today, you're not going to do that. Today, we're going to talk about cognitive dissonance, not as a theory, but as a lived experience. Especially the experience of living with it, when your rational beliefs have changed, but your emotional habits have not. Classically, cognitive dissonance is defined as discomfort that arises when you hold contradictory beliefs, or when your actions conflict with your beliefs. But the definition misses something. What you experience here is not competing ideas, it's a mismatch between what you think and how your body has learned to respond. You might say, "I understand this is not dangerous and not reasonable," and yet your body reacts as if it is. And this is not being irrational, it's just a split between explicit belief, what you consciously assent to, what you can articulate and defend, and implicit emotional learnings, what your nervous system has practiced through repetition, outcome, and survival. So the dissonance is not idea versus idea, it's idea versus habit. A habit is not a belief, it's a pattern of response that once reduced discomfort, even if it's no longer serving you. And habits live in the body. This matters because when this happens, you sometimes think you're failing at thinking, but your mind actually has two very different jobs. One job is to respond fast, to reduce tension, to regain control, and to keep you safe. The other job is to think things through, to reflect, to consider the consequences, and to choose according to what actually matters to you. They work together, but they are not built the same way, and they do not move at the same speed. The amygdala does not ask whether a strategy still fits your values. It asks one question: did this ever help me cope in the past? And the cortex works differently. It reflects, evaluates, it chooses. But it doesn't erase emotional learning. It can only work with it over time. So these systems are not enemies, they evolved for different purposes. And here's the key issue. The fast system acts first. The reflective system explains later, almost always. So what often happens is this. An emotional habit initiates the impulse. Say something, fix it, guide it. Almost immediately, your reflective mind notices. I don't actually want to do this. This isn't aligned with what I value. I want to give space here. And then you become aware. But it lands during or after the action has already started. That moment of awareness is where self-monitoring begins. and you're caught in between. An action tendency that's already in motion, and a value-based understanding that arrived a little too late to stop it. That's why it feels like I know better and I'm still doing it. This is not a failure of reason, it's the normal lag between what was learned quickly and what is being learned slowly. Now I want to talk a little bit about awareness because it's a word that's very popular today. And I just want to mention that I don't think awareness is resolution. It's not when you're aware, oh, everything changes. When awareness arrives, you have reached a place where change will eventually happen. It's not where it happens instantly. And awareness is practice. Logic doesn't override conditioning, it negotiates with it. So in the body, this kind of cognitive dissonance often shows up as tightness in the chest, or you feel something in your throat, you feel restless, a push and pull sensation, I want this, I don't want this, or mental looping. And something many people struggle to name, and I think this is a very good description of it, it's fatigue from self-monitoring. You're not just anxious, you're exhausted from holding two inner realities at once. Emotional habits have momentum. They come fast, they demand immediate action or immediate avoidance. They feel compelling even when you intellectually reject them. Rational belief is slower. It requires attention, it requires presence, and it requires repetition, and often not with immediate relief. So you try to use reason as a weapon. I shouldn't feel this. This is irrational. Why isn't this working yet? What you're really saying is, if reason were powerful enough, this discomfort would already be gone. And when it isn't, the second layer of dissonance appears. Now it's not just fear or sadness, it's shame about still feeling it. This is often when you start believing you have a willpower problem. But before talking about willpower, you need to understand self-monitoring. So what is self-monitoring? Self-monitoring doesn't begin before awareness, it begins because of awareness. It begins the moment you can see both sides at once. You understand the situation, you know logically what aligns with your values, and at the same time, you feel the pull of an older emotional habit moving you in the opposite direction. You can see the tension as it's happening. You know what you want to choose. You know why that choice matters, and still, your body moves faster than your logic. So that awareness doesn't resolve the conflict, it sometimes intensifies it. Because now you're not just acting, you're watching yourself act. So there's a split inside. I see what I'm doing, I understand why I'm doing it, and I still can't stop. This is sometimes the place where you say things you later regret, especially to people you love. Not because you don't care, but because the habit acts before restraint can settle in. And this is where self-monitoring grows stronger. Not because you're failing, but because you're holding two truths at once and expecting awareness to arbitrate between them. But awareness is not a switch. It doesn't shut habits down on command. Awareness is just a spotlight. It will illuminate the habit. It will illuminate the value. It leaves you standing in the middle and you need to choose. Now I want to talk a little bit about why self-monitoring is so exhausting. Emotional habits are fast. They are embodied. They often get immediate results. acting from logic is a lot slower. It requires restraint, you need to wait, you need to reflect, and it often produces no visible response at all. Self-monitoring happens when both are present at the same time. You are experiencing an emotion and at the same time managing the experience of having that emotion. So you're watching yourself, you are correcting yourself, you are evaluating your actions in real time. Is this rational? Am I responding correctly? Why isn't this improving yet? So there is no rest in the system. Even when you're quiet, your mind is working. So the fatigue that follows doesn't feel like sleepiness. It feels like irritability, emotional flatness, you being tired but unable to stop. This doesn't mean you're failing emotionally. Much more often, it means you're never off duty with yourself. Let's make this real. Imagine you have an emotional habit of trying to control situations. You guide, you step in, explain, you offer your opinion quickly. But not because you want power, but because somewhere along the way you learn that involvement reduces anxiety. Now, logically, you do understand something else. You know you can't truly control outcomes. You know you want other people to take responsibility. You know growth happens when people decide and learn. You believe this. You really value this, and still in the moment, you speak, you guide, you have to intervene. Sometimes you're even aware of it as it's happening, and you're thinking, I said I'd step back. I meant to stay quiet. Why am I doing this again? But this is not lack of insight, it's not dishonesty, and it's not weak willpower. Expressing yourself is just faster. It shapes the situation immediately. It gets response from other people and it creates a movement. People start saying things, they might start doing things. Restraint works differently. Restraint is quiet. You need to stay quiet. It moves slower and it requires tolerance for uncertainty. And often nothing happens right away. So the emotional habit obviously wins, not because it's right, but because it feels efficient. And the pain isn't just doing the old thing again, the pain is knowing while doing it. You knowingly step in even though you want to be quiet. That is self-monitoring. So why awareness doesn't instantly change behavior? This is something I've been struggling with. So after thinking about it for a long time, I think awareness shows you where you are. It doesn't instantly give you the capacity to act differently. So seeing the habit doesn't mean you can outpace it yet. Understanding doesn't erase momentum. Choice under tension is not failure, it is learning in progress. Your nervous system doesn't read values, it reads speed, outcome, and safety. So until new behavior becomes embodied, until restraint feels tolerable, self-monitoring often increases. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're in mid-transition. And this is the uncomfortable middle, where insight has already arrived, you are aware of all the insights, but your habit has not caught up yet. Now let's go back to willpower. And this is where willpower usually enters, but in the wrong role. You're taught that willpower means forcing yourself into alignment. You need to force yourself to be calm, you need to force courage, forcing the right response. But force doesn't retrain emotional habit. It only increases inner friction. What looks like a lack of willpower is probably often just exhaustion. You're exhausted from holding two inner realities at once and being told one of them should already be gone. Now, underneath this struggle, there is an unexamined premise, and this is where we're going to the logic-based reframe. And it goes like this. If I am rational, I should be able to control my emotions. Or if I truly understand something, my emotional response should change accordingly. These premises sound very reasonable, but they make an impossible demand. They assume awareness equals control. And control is not how human beings change. So let's define willpower. Think of your mind as having two complementary skills. One responds quickly, shaped by habit and past experience. One reflects, evaluates, and chooses according to your values. Your emotional habit may appear first, the impulse to act, to guide, to speak. Your reflective mind is aware, but it needs time to participate. In this sense, willpower isn't force. It isn't discipline in the moral sense. Willpower is the space between impulse and action, the moment where you notice what you feel and choose what matters. Your emotions arrive first, your values arrive second. Willpower is letting them both exist and choosing the values even when the feelings disagree. It doesn't demand calm and it doesn't demand motivation. It just asks for a pause and a choice. You choose. Notice what happens when you loosen self-monitoring just a little, when you allow an emotion to be present without trying to suppress it or correct it. You're not acting it out and you're not pushing it away. You are letting it exist without fleeing from it or fixing it. And often there is a small release, not because the emotion disappears, but because the inner battle pauses. And that pause is very important. And here we are at the end of episode 8. I know this one is a bit more abstract, but I hope you can resonate with what you've listened to today. And I want to close this episode with a few words. The kind of cognitive dissonance we've been talking about here is not a conflict between ideas. It's a conflict between reflective understanding and emotionally conditioned response, between what you consciously believe and what your system has learned to expect through repetition, experience, and habit. That gap is not a mistake. It is a transition zone, a sign that your beliefs have evolved faster than your emotional habits. And that means change is already underway, just not on a schedule that emotional learning can follow. Living inside that gap can feel uncomfortable, it can feel frustrating, and it can feel like you should be further along. But it's not a flaw. It is the cost of integration. If there is one small practice to take from this, it's not about fixing or correcting anything. When a strong emotion shows up, before you explain it, before you act on it, before you judge yourself, pause. Just for a few seconds. Not to make the feeling disappear, not to try and control it, but to give your reflective understanding time to enter the moment. Because reflective understanding doesn't interrupt emotion, it joins it, and it needs a moment to start working. And you pausing for a minute doesn't mean you are confused. It's where choice becomes a possibility. If you're listening and recognizing yourself, let this land. You are not weak, you are not failing, and you are not irrational. You are adapting. And adaptation takes time, not pressure. This isn't about learning how to fix yourself. I say that many times. It's about giving language to a painful in-between state. A state where insight has arrived, but habit hasn't caught up yet. We are not aiming for emotional perfection. We are aiming for inner coherence and dignity. The ability to say, I know what I believe, I know what I value, and I can allow my emotional habits to learn at their own pace. Let's end here today. I don't have any answers, But just let's give ourselves some permission. Permission to pause, permission to wait a few seconds before we react. Permission to let knowing and feeling move towards each other slowly. And that's exactly the permission to be human in the middle of that gap. You don't have to force alignment. You're already on the way. I want to thank you for listening. The reflections in this podcast are inspired by logic-based therapy, a philosophical counseling model developed by Dr. Elliot D. Cohen. I'm a certified logic-based therapy consultant, and what I share here is my own perspective on its principles. This podcast is meant for reflection and learning and isn't a substitute for professional mental health. Take care, and I'll see you next time at your StillPoint.